It was an ordinary weekday morning when Manny Pacquiao, one of the most recognizable athletes in the world, decided to visit one of the banks where he kept his accounts. True to his character, he didn't arrive with bodyguards, assistants, or fanfare. He wore a simple polo shirt and jeans, walked with an easy stride, and stood quietly in line like any other customer. Inside the lobby, people were busy with their own transactions. Some glanced at him casually, but few seemed to realize who he was. To Manny, that was fine. Fame had never been an excuse for arrogance in his eyes. He had always believed in humility, in living as close to ordinary life as possible. When it was finally his turn, Manny stepped forward and politely explained that he needed access to some account services. The teller looked at him suspiciously, scanned his ID, then frowned. "Are you sure this account is yours?" the teller asked coldly. "This section is for VIP clients only. I think you might be mistaken." Manny's brow furrowed slightly, but his tone remained calm. "Yes, this is my account. Please double-check your system." The teller gave a dismissive huff and called over a manager. Moments later, a tall man in a suit approached, arms crossed, posture full of authority. He barely looked at Manny before saying in a sharp voice, "Listen, we don't have time for people pretending to be someone they're not. This bank doesn't tolerate fraud. If you can't prove your standing right away, I suggest you leave." The words cut through the lobby like a blade. Customers began whispering, turning their heads toward the small scene at the counter. Some pulled out their phones, curious. Manny, however, didn't lose his composure. He could have revealed who he was instantly. He could have reminded them that his name was known across continents. But instead, he simply said, "I came here with respect. I ask for the same in return." The manager scoffed and waved at the security guards. "Escort him out. We don't have time for games." Gasps rippled through the crowd. A senator, a champion, a philanthropist, and yet here he was, being thrown out of his own bank. What happened just hours later would leave this bank's staff speechless. The moment the manager gave the order, the air in the lobby shifted. Two security guards stepped forward, their faces uncertain. They weren't sure if they should really escort this man out. He hadn't raised his voice, hadn't caused a scene, hadn't done anything wrong. But the manager's command was sharp and demanding. Manny didn't move. He stood calmly at the counter, his posture relaxed, his voice low but firm. "Sir, I am not pretending. I came here to access my own accounts. If there is confusion, please check your system again." But the manager's eyes narrowed, his tone dripping with arrogance. "Do you know how many people come here every week claiming to be someone important? We've seen it all before. You think just because you walk in here with confidence that you belong in our VIP section? Don't waste our time." A murmur spread across the lobby. Customers shuffled uncomfortably in line, some whispering, some pulling out their phones to record. A woman near the entrance whispered, "That man looks so familiar. Where have I seen him before?" A young man beside her frowned. "I don't know, but this doesn't feel right. He hasn't been disrespectful at all." Manny's wife, who had quietly accompanied him, touched his arm and whispered urgently, "Let's just go. Manny, this isn't worth it." But Manny shook his head gently. His eyes were calm, though his voice carried weight. "No. If we walk away quietly, they'll do this again to the next person who doesn't look the part. Respect shouldn't be conditional." The manager let out a loud laugh, shaking his head. "Respect? Respect is earned. And you, sir, haven't earned anything here. My staff and I decide who qualifies for these services. If you don't like it, you can leave." Gasps rippled again among the crowd. Phones were raised higher now, recording every word. The arrogance in the manager's voice clashed sharply with Manny's unshakable calm. Manny clasped his hands together, not in anger, but in restraint. "All I ask is that you verify my documents properly. Treat me the way you would treat any customer." The guards hesitated. They looked at each other, clearly conflicted. One of them shifted uneasily, lowering his voice. "Sir, maybe we should just check again." But the manager cut him off with a glare. "Do as you're told. Escort him out. This is my branch. I make the rules here." This time the lobby erupted with disapproval. Customers started speaking up louder than before. "This isn't right. He hasn't done anything wrong. You can't treat people like this." Still, the manager refused to back down. His pride fueled his stubbornness. "If you don't leave now," he snapped at Manny, "you will be removed by force." Manny's children, who had been waiting quietly by the door, looked frightened. One of them whispered, "Dad, let's just go." Manny placed a reassuring hand on his child's shoulder and said softly, "Don't worry, we are not in the wrong." The contrast couldn't have been sharper. The manager's growing hostility versus Manny's unshakable dignity. One man's pride against another man's principle. Finally, with phones still recording and whispers echoing around the room, Manny took a small step back. His voice carried one final line, spoken not with anger but with conviction. "You can force me out, but the truth will not stay hidden. Respect should never depend on appearances." The words hung in the air like a challenge, echoing across the lobby. Even those who didn't know his name felt something powerful in his stance. Moments later, Manny turned and walked toward the doors with his wife and children. The guards followed awkwardly, not laying a hand on him, almost ashamed of the role they had been asked to play. Inside, the manager puffed out his chest as though he had won some victory. But in reality, the seeds of his downfall had already been planted. Dozens of phones had captured his every word. Dozens of witnesses had seen the arrogance and the injustice, and outside those glass doors the storm was just beginning. Have you ever been disrespected because of how you look? Comment below where you're watching this from. As Manny Pacquiao stepped out of the bank, the crowd inside was buzzing with murmurs. Some were shocked, others outraged. A handful of customers followed him outside, still recording, their cameras catching every second of the unbelievable scene. A global boxing icon, a senator, a philanthropist, dismissed and humiliated by his own bank. The warm afternoon sun hit Manny's face as he paused just beyond the glass doors. His wife tugged his sleeve gently. "Please, Manny, let's not make this worse. The children are nervous. Let's go home." Manny looked down at his children. Their young eyes were wide with confusion and fear. He bent slightly, placing his hands on their shoulders, and reassured them. "Don't be afraid. We've done nothing wrong. Sometimes standing still is stronger than walking away." But inside, the situation was only growing worse. The manager hadn't calmed down. He was pacing, muttering to his staff loud enough for customers to hear. "Unbelievable. People think they can just walk in here and demand VIP treatment. Not on my watch." One of the tellers, clearly uncomfortable, spoke softly. "Sir, maybe we should check again. He didn't seem like he was lying." The manager slammed his hand on the counter. "Enough, do your job and stop questioning me. If we let one fraud slip through, our reputation is ruined." Ironically, his words were already sowing the seeds of the bank's real reputation collapse. Back outside, Manny remained by the steps. People were beginning to recognize him. At first it was whispers. "That man, isn't that Manny Pacquiao?" Another person frowned, trying to place the face. "No, it can't be. Why would Manny Pacquiao be here waiting like this?" But then a teenager gasped loudly. "Wait, that is Manny Pacquiao. Look at his face. That's him, the boxer. He's the one who fought Mayweather, the senator from the Philippines." The words spread like wildfire. Strangers pulled out their phones, searching pictures of Manny online and comparing them to the man standing calmly on the bank steps. Their murmurs grew louder, their disbelief turning into outrage. "Wait, so the bank just kicked out Manny Pacquiao? They didn't recognize him? They accused him of fraud? Are they serious?" The crowd was swelling now. More people gathered, drawn by the buzz of voices and the glowing phone screens capturing every moment. Someone shouted, "That man's a hero! How could they treat him like that?" Meanwhile, Manny's wife grew more anxious. She leaned in close. "Manny, please. This is turning into a spectacle. Let's just leave before it gets out of hand." Manny shook his head gently, his eyes calm but unyielding. "If we leave now, the story will be theirs to tell. If we stay, the truth will show itself." Back inside, the manager peered through the glass doors, noticing the commotion. His pride only hardened. Instead of de-escalating, he stormed outside, his voice raised for all to hear. "You need to leave this property immediately," he barked at Manny. "If you don't, I will call the police." Gasps rippled through the crowd. The idea of police being called on Manny Pacquiao, a man who had represented his country, fought for his people and served as senator, was almost too much to believe. Cameras zoomed in, capturing the tense face-off. Manny's response was steady, unwavering. He didn't shout, he didn't flinch. He simply raised his hand slightly and spoke in a voice everyone could hear. "I am not here to cause trouble. I am here because this is my bank, my account, and I ask to be treated fairly. You can call whoever you want, but justice does not change." The silence that followed was heavy. Even the children standing close to their father seemed to sense the gravity of the moment. And then, slowly but surely, the tide turned. More people in the crowd began speaking up, this time directly to the manager. "Why are you threatening him? He hasn't done anything wrong. Do you even know who that is? Check your facts before you embarrass yourself further." The manager's face reddened. But he was still blind to the truth, too wrapped up in his pride to recognize who stood before him. Inside the bank, a junior employee rushed to a computer, nervously pulling up client records. Her hands trembled as she typed. When the system loaded, her eyes widened in shock. She whispered to her colleague, "Oh my God, that's him. That's really him." But by then, the damage had already been done. The videos had captured the arrogance, the disrespect, the threats. Clips were already being uploaded online, spreading faster than the manager could possibly imagine. For Manny, the moment wasn't about pride. It was about principle. As the crowd grew louder, their support swelling, he stood tall on the steps, his calm presence more powerful than any punch he had ever thrown in the ring. The world was about to see what had just unfolded, and the bank had no idea what storm was coming. The crowd outside the bank had grown into a small audience. Curious pedestrians slowed down, some crossing the street just to see what the commotion was about. Dozens of phones were held high, recording every moment. The manager, still flushed with anger, barked again. "I said leave this property now, or I'll have you arrested for trespassing." The arrogance in his tone made bystanders exchange shocked glances. Arrest Manny Pacquiao? The very idea seemed absurd, and then it happened. A middle-aged man, standing a few rows back in the crowd, suddenly raised his voice. "Wait a second. That's Manny Pacquiao. That's the Pac-Man himself." The words landed like thunder. People turned sharply, whispering and pointing. Another voice joined in, this time from a teenager. "He's right. That's Manny Pacquiao, the world champion. Look, it's him." Suddenly, recognition spread like wildfire. Manny's face, though humble and unassuming, was unmistakable once people connected the dots. Videos of his fights, his victories, his global fame, they all came rushing back to the minds of the onlookers. Gasps and murmurs turned into shouts. "That's him. That's the senator of the Philippines. The man they just kicked out is one of the greatest boxers in history. How could they not recognize him?" Phones zoomed in closer. Cameras caught every detail of Manny's calm, steady posture, the way he stood tall without shouting, without retaliating, even as humiliation hung in the air. The manager, confused by the sudden shift in the crowd, snapped, "Who cares who he thinks he is? No one is above the rules here." But his words only fueled the fire. A young man shouted back, "Do you even know who you're talking to?" "That's Manny Pacquiao. He's a national hero," another voice chimed in. "Not just a hero, and he's probably richer than this whole bank branch combined." Laughter rippled through the crowd, sharp and mocking, but behind it was anger. Anger at the disrespect that had just unfolded in front of them. Manny raised his hand slightly, signaling for calm. He didn't want chaos, he didn't want a mob. He simply said, "Please everyone, this isn't about who I am. It's about how we treat each other." His humility only deepened the crowd's respect. People shook their heads in disbelief. How could a man of such global stature remain so composed, so soft-spoken while being disrespected in public? Inside the bank, employees were scrambling. The junior staff member who had pulled up Manny's records whispered urgently to her colleagues, "It's true. He's one of our biggest investors. He's on our VIP client list. The manager just insulted the owner." The whispers traveled quickly, reaching the ears of the staff who had been skeptical before. Panic spread among them. They realized the magnitude of what was happening, but outside, the manager still hadn't caught up. His pride blinded him. "I don't care if he's a boxer or a senator," he sneered, his voice loud enough for the crowd to hear. "This is my branch, and I decide who belongs here." The arrogance was staggering. The crowd erupted with jeers. People shouted, "You'll regret this. Record everything. Post it online." Indeed, by now, dozens of live streams were already running. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. Manny's face was appearing everywhere. Clips were being shared with captions like, "Bank manager kicks out Manny Pacquiao," and "World champion humiliated in his own bank." Manny's wife stepped closer, her voice soft but urgent. "Manny, please, let's not drag this any further. But Manny shook his head gently, his eyes never leaving the manager. Sometimes silence allows injustice to grow. Today we cannot be silent. His words carried across the crowd, echoing with weight. People nodded, some even clapped. His calmness, his dignity, it was more powerful than anger. The manager, however, looked around and finally began to realize that the situation was slipping out of his control. He could feel the eyes of the crowd burning into him, judging him, mocking him. The authority he had clung to so tightly just minutes before was now crumbling in the face of truth. And yet, even in this moment, Manny didn't raise his voice. He didn't flaunt his fame or his fortune. He stood there as any man would, demanding only respect. Nothing more. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The bank manager had dismissed him as just another fraud, not realizing he was humiliating one of the most respected men in the world, and doing it in front of cameras. The story was no longer contained to a single branch. It was about to explode across the world. The energy outside the bank had shifted completely. What began as a humiliating scene was now something larger, something symbolic. The whispers had become chants. The crowd had grown bold, standing firmly behind Manny Pacquiao. Dozens of phones streamed live, thousands of viewers piling in online. The moment was no longer private, it was global. The manager, though clearly rattled, still clung to his pride. His voice was sharp, his gestures exaggerated as he waved at the security guards. "Remove him. He's causing a disturbance." But the guards hesitated again. Their eyes darted between the crowd, their recording phones, and Manny himself. Something about the calmness in Manny's stance made it impossible to treat him like an intruder. Manny finally took a step forward, his expression still steady but his tone stronger than before. His voice carried across the steps, silencing even the whispers in the back rows of the crowd. "You say I'm causing a disturbance," Manny said firmly, "but all I did was ask for access to my own account. You questioned my honesty. You accused me of fraud. You treated me as though I were less than human, simply because I did not walk in here dressed as you expected." The words rang out, each syllable deliberate, echoing with dignity. The crowd erupted in applause and cheers. Someone shouted, "Tell him, Manny." Another voice cried out, "Respect every customer." The manager stiffened, his jaw tight. "This isn't about appearance," he said defensively. "It's about procedure. We can't just believe anyone who—" Manny cut in, his voice calm but commanding. "Procedure does not give you the right to humiliate people. Respect is not a privilege you grant only to those who look the part. Respect is the foundation of service. Without it, your procedures mean nothing." Silence followed. For a brief moment, even the traffic on the street seemed to fade. The crowd was locked onto Manny's words. He continued, his gaze sweeping across not just the manager but the onlookers, the cameras, the guards. "I did not tell you who I was because I should not have to. Every customer who walks through these doors deserves dignity, whether they are rich or poor, known or unknown. The measure of a person's worth is not in their clothes or their fame or their fortune. It is in their humanity." The applause this time was thunderous. The crowd clapped, some whistled, others shouted words of support. The energy was electric, and the manager's authority crumbled a little more with each cheer. Inside, bank employees watched nervously from behind the glass. Some looked ashamed, others afraid. A junior teller whispered, "He's right. We should have treated him better from the start." Another nodded, glancing toward the manager with thinly veiled contempt. The manager, now visibly sweating, snapped back, "Enough of this nonsense. You're just trying to play the victim here. You think you can stand on my steps and preach to me?" But Manny didn't flinch. His calmness seemed to unnerve the man even more. He responded with a quiet strength that cut deeper than anger ever could. "I do not need to play the victim," Manny said, his voice low but powerful. "You created this scene with your own arrogance, and now the world is watching. Ask yourself, what do they see? Do they see a strong leader? Or do they see a man who cannot recognize respect when it stands right in front of him?" The question landed like a knockout punch. The crowd roared again, chanting Manny's name now. "Pacquiao! Pacquiao! Pacquiao!" The manager's face turned pale. His authority, once absolute, was now unraveling with every passing second. The chants drowned out his voice. The cameras captured his humiliation. And Manny stood like a pillar, unshaken, dignified, unmovable. Even those watching online began flooding comment sections with messages of admiration. This is why Manny is a legend, not just in the ring, but in life. Others wrote, the manager's career is over. Pacquiao just schooled him with nothing but truth. At that moment, Manny raised his hand again, signaling the crowd to quiet. When the noise settled, he spoke one final line that pierced through the chaos. You tried to strip me of dignity, but you only stripped it from yourself. Because respect denied is respect lost, and you have lost it today. The crowd erupted once more, the chants shaking the very walls of the bank. The manager staggered back, speechless, his power crumbling before the force of one man's calm conviction. And then, just as the tension reached its peak, the sound of approaching sirens filled the air. A police car pulled up, officers stepping out. Their faces puzzled by the massive crowd and the man at the center of it all. They had no idea that what awaited them was a storm of truth that could no longer be contained. The police officers stepped out of their car, bewildered by the sight in front of them, a swelling crowd, dozens of cameras, chants echoing through the street. And at the center, a calm but unyielding Manny Pacquiao. One officer held up his hands, trying to cut through the noise. Everyone, calm down! What's going on here? The bank manager rushed forward, relief flashing across his face. Officers, thank God you're here. This man is trespassing, refusing to leave after being denied service. I want him removed immediately. The crowd booed loudly, jeering at the manager's words. He's lying? One shouted. That's Manny Pacquiao. Another cried. Phones zoomed in closer, recording every word for the world to hear. The officers turned toward Manny, their expressions shifting from professional authority to sheer disbelief. They had recognized him instantly. This wasn't some random troublemaker. This was Manny Pacquiao, a living legend, a senator, a national hero. One officer's mouth fell open. Sir, he stopped himself, almost embarrassed. You're Manny Pacquiao. Gasps rippled through the bystanders who hadn't fully realized yet. People pointed, murmuring louder, the recognition spreading like a tidal wave. More voices rang out. It really is him. He's one of the bank's biggest investors. They humiliated Pacquiao. The second officer turned on the manager, his brows furrowed. You didn't know who this man was? You called us out here to remove Manny Pacquiao? The manager froze. His eyes darted between the officers, the crowd, and Manny. His arrogance faltered for the first time. Wait, what? He stammered. That can't be true. He didn't say. A junior bank employee finally pushed through the crowd, clutching a tablet. Her voice trembled as she read from the screen. It's true. Manny Pacquiao is one of our premier clients. His accounts, his investments, they're all here. He owns part of this institution. The revelation hit like a thunderclap. The crowd erupted with cheers, some people shaking their heads in disbelief, others recording the manager's stunned face as proof of his ignorance. Manny, however, didn't smirk, didn't gloat, didn't bask in the satisfaction of being right. Instead, he stood silently, his eyes steady, his hands clasped in front of him. The manager stumbled backward, sweat forming on his brow. I didn't know. I thought he was just what? A bystander shouted. Just another poor man? Just someone you thought didn't belong? The crowd roared with anger, their voices crashing over the manager like waves. He tried to speak, but every word was drowned out by chants of respect. Respect, respect. The police officers, recognizing the futility of the moment, turned to Manny. One of them spoke carefully, almost reverently. Sir, do you want us to press charges against this man? Manny shook his head slowly. No, this is not about punishment. It is about principle. His words quieted the crowd just enough for him to continue. This man's actions reflect a mindset too common in the world today. To judge people by their appearance, to assume worth based on what we see, not who they are. I could have told you my name the moment I walked in. But what of those who do not have a famous name? Do they deserve humiliation? The silence that followed was thick, heavy, almost reverent. Manny's voice carried not just to those standing on the steps, but to the thousands already watching online. You called the police to remove me, Manny said, turning to the manager. But you have only removed your own respect. A position of power does not give you the right to abuse others. It gives you the responsibility to serve with dignity. The crowd erupted into applause once more, some cheering, others chanting his name louder than ever. The manager's face had turned ghostly pale. His arrogance was gone, replaced by fear and humiliation. He muttered incoherently as if trying to excuse himself. But the words never formed. Manny didn't look at him again. Instead, he turned toward the officers, the crowd, and the cameras. Let this moment be a reminder. Respect is not something to be reserved for a chosen few. It is owed to every person, no matter how they look, where they come from, or what name they carry. With that, Manny took his wife's hand and guided his children down the steps. The crowd parted for him, cheering, applauding, chanting his name as he walked away with quiet dignity. Behind him, the bank's glass doors reflected the stunned and broken figure of the manager, standing in silence, his pride shattered. By the time Manny reached his car, the videos had already gone viral. Millions were watching, sharing, and reacting, and the world was about to deliver its judgment. By the next morning, the incident had become impossible to ignore. News anchors replayed the clips on television. Headlines scrolled across international networks, and millions of shares flooded social media platforms. Manny Pacquiao kicked out of his own bank. Manager humiliates global icon, gets exposed in front of cameras. From boxing ring to bank steps, Pacquiao teaches the world a lesson in respect. Clips of the confrontation circulated everywhere. The manager's arrogance, the crowd's outrage, the moment Manny finally spoke with quiet authority. Hashtags like "Q and respect all customers" and "Mer Pacquiao speaks truth" trended worldwide. Comment sections exploded. He could have bragged about who he was, but he didn't. That's real humility. The manager didn't just insult a man. He insulted humanity. Pacquiao showed us what true strength looks like: dignity. The bank scrambled into damage control. Its corporate office issued a hasty public apology. "We sincerely regret the unacceptable behavior of our branch manager. Senator Pacquiao has always been a valued client and investor. This incident does not reflect our values and immediate disciplinary action is underway." But for the public, the apology rang hollow. Customers lined up at branches across the Philippines, not to deposit but to withdraw. Social media filled with photos of people closing their accounts in protest, demanding accountability beyond a press release. The manager at the center of it all vanished from public sight, suspended pending investigation. Insiders whispered that his career in banking was effectively over, and yet Manny Pacquiao never once gloated. He didn't demand lawsuits or revenge. He didn't use the moment to elevate his own name. Instead, he chose something far more powerful. The next day, Manny stood before cameras at a press conference. Wearing a simple barong, he looked every bit the humble man people had always admired. The room was packed with journalists, their cameras flashing, their microphones pointed forward. Manny began softly, his voice steady. "What happened yesterday was not unique to me. It happens every day to countless people who are judged by their appearance, their clothes, their status. The only difference is that when it happened to me, people noticed." The room was silent. Reporters scribbled furiously. "I do not want this incident to be remembered because of who I am," Manny continued. "I want it to be remembered because of what it represents. Respect should never depend on wealth or fame or position. Respect is the right of every human being." The word spread almost instantly, broadcast on live TV, clipped into viral posts, translated into dozens of languages. Leaders, athletes, and celebrities praised him for his dignity. Even critics who often opposed his politics admitted his message had struck the right chord. On social media, ordinary people shared their own experiences of being dismissed, disrespected, or judged unfairly. Manny's story had opened a conversation much larger than one bank or one manager. It had become a global reminder about humanity. And Manny himself, he returned to his routine. He trained. He served his community. He continued with life as though nothing had happened. But the world didn't forget. The viral moment became part of his legacy. Not a boxing victory, not a political speech, but a lesson in humility and strength outside the ring. One final clip from his press conference was replayed endlessly. "Respect is not something you give only to the powerful. Respect is something you owe to everyone because we are all human. Never forget that." The applause in that room had been loud, but the echo of those words was louder, carried across the world, etched into millions of hearts. If you believe no one should be judged by appearances, type respect in the comments and subscribe for more powerful stories like this one.